Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more of the Great War. This time we are on to week 129. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Alright, no peace for the wicked. Okay, this should be fun, shouldn't it? Gonna be a blast. Go ahead, dive right in.
Food shortages, strikes, assassinations, covert attempts to end the war, covert attempts to expand the war.
Woo!
The situation in Russia, by now, was dangerously unstable. It wouldn't get any better this week, though, as there was yet another political shakeup in Petrograd.
Dun dun dun. Oh yeah, Petrograd's the capital of the Russian Empire. I always forget that.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, the new year rolled in, and with it, the Central Powers forces continued rolling in Romania. In neutral Greece, the Allies listed humiliating demands that the Greeks must accept before the Allied blockade would end, and both sides had for
Oh my god. The shit that is happening in Greece is so fucked up, dude.
weeks been issuing peace notes and responses, none of which seemed like they had any chance to stop the war. There was more of that this week, too. On the 10th came the Allied reply to U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's peace note. It stated that the Allied war aims are necessarily and first of all the restoration of Belgium, Serbia, and Montenegro, with the compensation due to them, the evacuation of the invaded territories in France, in Russia, in Romania, with due reparation. It went on to demand a reorganized Europe based on respect for nationalities, the liberation of Italians, Czechs, Slovaks, other Slavs, and Romanians from foreign domination, and turning the Ottomans completely out of Europe. Germany responded that the Allied concern for small states is pretty hypocritical and pointed out
Yeah.
the Irish and the Boers as British examples. The subjugation of North Africa by France, Britain, and Italy. The suppression of foreign nationalities.
Well, I mean, Germany, you also kind of have some colonies in Africa. Just saying.
In Russia, and the oppression of Greece, which is unexampled in history. There was a lot more to the notes from both sides about international rights.
I mean, hold up. Yeah, by this point in time, there really hasn't been a war where the situation of Greece, what Greece is going through right now, has happened. So he ain't wrong. The Germans ain't wrong with that statement.
But you get the general idea. Each side claimed to be the noble one and the injured party. But this was all going to become totally academic soon anyhow. On January 9th, 1917, Kaiser Wilhelm held a Crown Council that would finally address the question of unrestricted submarine warfare. The chief of the naval staff, Admiral Henning von Holtzendorf, not to be confused with Conrad von Hotzendorf, told him that by bringing it back, Britain would be forced to sue for peace within 6 months. He had actually written that in a memo last month, but he reaffirmed those words. The Kaiser wondered what the Americans would think of this, and Holtzendorf replied, "I will give your majesty my word as an officer that not one American will land on the continent."
Ooh. Yikes.
German Chancellor Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg had always been against the move, as he still was, since he believed it would in fact bring America into the war. But with all the military against him, he withdrew his opposition. The Kaiser gave the green light. Submarine warfare against all shipping, whatever flag it flew, whatever cargo it carried, would begin February 1st. Got to point out here that the reason this discussion was coming now and not last fall was Denmark. Yep, Denmark, remember them? Germany had been stretched so thin with sending so many troops to Romania that if they had begun unrestricted submarine warfare in October or November and had sunk a bunch of neutral Danish ships, the Danish army could have taken Berlin in a couple of afternoons with little or no opposition. It was only now that Romania had been dealt with that the issue could again be raised. And speaking of Romania being dealt with, that campaign was still in its later stages. Cossack cavalry and Romanian infantry were fiercely fighting off the German Alpenkorps and Austrian mountain brigades this week as they slowly advanced. 1,000 meters high on the Magura Odobesti Massif, west of Fokshani. On the 6th, the detachment Rommel took Height 617, which proved to be the key to taking the massif. They carried heavy machine guns up the heights on their backs since pack animals couldn't make it. To the southeast, the Central Powers advanced on the Putna and Sereth rivers. The Russians attacked, though, on the 6th, opening a gap southeast of Fokshani. The next day, the Germans not only plugged that hole, but drove the Russians back across the Sereth. By January 10th, with his men on one side of the Putna-Sereth River and the Russians on the other, German General Erich von Falkenhayn issued orders to adopt a static defense. The Romanian campaign had come to an end for now. This winter, there were 3 Russian armies numbering 40 divisions in Romania. These troops took over most of the front lines and had their own static defense opposite the Germans. This allowed the French military mission to Romania to make plans to re-equip and retrain the Romanian army over the spring of 1917. Romania could maybe make up a force of 15 divisions, but it would take months to put them together. And of course, some of them had to remain on the front lines. So 6 divisions under General Alexandru Averescu would stay in the Eastern Carpathians and carry out operations there, while the other 9 would either train in Romanian Moldavia or provide relief for Averescu. This was a pretty good setup for the Romanians, and it may result in them continuing the fight, but it left the Russians with the lion's share of the defenses of unoccupied Romania.
I mean, what else to expect with that? To be fair, Russia's got a lot of men. Romania don't.
Russian Army Chief of Staff Mikhail Alexeyev had said 5 months ago that Romania's entry into the war would prove a liability for Russia, and for the moment, he appeared to be right.
That's not going to change. It's going to stay a liability.
Since August, the Romanians had lost over 73,000 men killed,
Romania.
147,000 captured, and around 90,000 missing in action. I'm not really sure of the number of the wounded, unfortunately. The campaign that many had believed would restart the Brusilov offensive and bring down the Central Powers had pretty much had the opposite effect. Russia had been forced to send so many troops down to Romania to guard the Russian flank that all Russian offensive movement on the Eastern Front had stopped. The Central Powers had gained over 2 million tons of Romanian grain, 250,000 head of livestock, 200,000 tons of timber, and Romania's oil output, which was around 1 million tons a year. Considering that this winter was the worst of the war, known in Germany as the turnip winter since the potato harvest had failed, and many people in Central Europe were actually starving to death, there are sources that question whether Germany and Austria-Hungary would have been able to even continue the war without this bounty. They'd also need the will to continue it, of course, and morale was dropping everywhere. Like on the Western Front this week, which had been fairly quiet since the end of the Battle of Verdun last month. But on the 10th, British troops attacked the German lines north of Beaumont-Hamel. Now, rain and sleet had been falling for days, and the battlefield was made up pretty much of swamps and tiny lakes. The British penetrated...
It's so crazy how much the land changed in just 3 years, right? Like, this ain't what this part of France is supposed to look like, man. I don't think that's a swampy part of France.
The German positions half a kilometer, taking 120 cold, wet, miserable German prisoners, a larger number than the British raiding party itself. The next day, in snow up to their knees, the British took another trench there, and the majority of the Germans did not even put up a fight, but surrendered at once. Around another 180 prisoners were taken. You could see how low morale was by this point in winter. But over in Russia, there was a bit of hope. Rasputin had been murdered only days ago, and there was hope that his machinations would die with him. But Interior Minister Alexander Protopopov simply stepped into Rasputin's place. He maintained his hold over the Tsar by means of spiritualistic seances in which he pretended to have communication with the spirit of the dead monk.
God.
All Russia was against Protopopov. In fact, at the palace's New Year's reception, Rodchenko, the president of the Duma, refused to shake Protopopov's hand and turned his back on him, which caused a sensation in the press. Also, when Protopopov entered the rooms of his club in Petrograd, All of the members stood up and walked out. Alexander Trepov, the prime minister, who was, like everybody else but the Tsar and Tsarina, against Protopopov, resigned this week and was replaced by Prince Nikolai Golitsyn. Golitsyn, too, insisted on Protopopov's resignation, but the Tsar refused. Minister of War Dmitry Shuvayev was also removed and replaced with General Mikhail Belyaev. And here are a couple of notes to end the week. On the 9th, the Allies sent an ultimatum to Greece demanding that they accept last week's conditions for lifting the blockade. That same day, the British took Ottoman positions at Rafah and 1,600 prisoners. The whole Sinai Peninsula was now under British control. And the week ends, and with it, the Romanian campaign. Minor actions in the West reveal German despair, while there is yet another government shakeup in Russia. In September 1915, Tsar Nicholas had taken over personal command of the Russian armies. After that, the Tsarina had assumed more and more control of internal affairs in Russia. In the nearly 16 months of what some call the Tsarina's rule, there have been 4 prime ministers, 3 foreign ministers, 3 ministers of war, and 5 ministers of the interior. People called this ministerial leapfrog. It repeatedly removed competent men from power and didn't give anyone a chance to really master their job. The internal disorganization that had resulted by this time was staggering, and it was being intentionally fanned by the one man who kept his job, Alexander Protopopov. Dark times lay ahead. If you'd like to see a special...
And that was Great War Week 129. No peace for the wicked. Very happy? Yay? Woo! So, this war is amazing. Anyways, this was a good episode. Not as good as I think the previous one, but still good. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.